On May 17th, 1649, a group of Oliver Cromwell's soldiers entered a churchyard and killed three of their own, three soldiers. Um, these men were part of a political movement known as the Levelers. And that is what we're going to talk about today are the Levelers. And we're going to talk about their influence, their non-influence, and we're going to talk about why you should know who these people were.
True. If you're a libertarian, the Levelers are your godfathers. If you're a civil libertarian of any sort, these are your people. And like Mike said, they're a footnote in history, to be honest. There aren't. I bet if I went around and polled everyone in my neighborhood, everyone who knows about the Levelers is sitting right here.
Right.
Now,
by the way, I have to say how this all came up. We were talking the other night and we were talking music because I like music.
Yeah.
And I said, man, there's a band that I like that I've heard of.
Yeah.
And I can't think of their name. And they represented some political movement in, I think, England or something. And so you started to look them up and I couldn't remember. And then I said, the Wreckers.
Yeah. Like, I think they were called the Wreckers. I'm like, I don't know a political movement called the Wreckers.
And then
I was just like, do you mean the Levelers?
It's like, that's the one.
Because I'd never heard of the band, right? And you'd never heard of the political movement.
Right. I just knew there were. In fact, I thought the only thing I thought of them based on the lyrics of the content of the band, I thought there was some kind of communistic /
like hippies.
Yeah, more like more like old school anarchists.
Old school anarchists.
But of the communist variety, the black red flag.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's kind of that's where I saw them, and you were like, the Levelers, dude, that is my jam.
Yeah, the Levelers. That's the thing. When I think I first came to know about the Levelers, the same way I came to know about a lot of things that I talk about and teach about through Dr. Vetterli at BYU, when he was teaching, the origin of the American political science. Where did we get our inspiration? Where did we learn these things? And one of the groups he mentioned, and albeit maybe for 2 minutes, was the Levelers.
Right.
And then I remember when I got my, first copy of Sidney's Discourses, there was something in the introduction about the Leveler movement. And of course, I thought originally, well, the Levelers, that doesn't sound like something I would support. The whole Mark Antony thing about lopping the heads off of the
right.
Anyone that shows himself to be virtuous or wise, cut him down to size. And that's not what the Levelers are about.
No.
The Levelers were actually more about pulling power down than about forcibly equalizing everyone. Because like we talked about with de Tocqueville a couple of weeks ago, you don't want, you shouldn't be willing to accept servitude in the name of equality.
Right.
And the Levelers were not about that at all. And in fact, like you said, these were guys, Mike, who they won. Their side won.
Well, let's back up.
Okay.
This gives some context.
All right, go on.
So that was 1649. What? 10 years earlier, 20 years? Like, what are we talking about? When did the New Model Army come?
Well, like about 8 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 8 years earlier, this guy that we do hear a lot about, Oliver Cromwell.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think most people know much about him, but you can. Yeah, I mean, I've been to his house actually. When I lived, when I lived in England, his house was just down the road.
Okay, knock on the door.
It's a little museum. No, it's a little museum.
What's up, Ollie?
It's a little museum. Oh, I would stab him in the heart if he was still alive.
Right.
But his house is a little museum now.
Yeah. It's funny. and this is just almost a random thought, but like Cromwell, I think of Cromwell and Napoleon in the same kind of
Hmm.
feeling
Hmm.
from a standpoint of there was such great hope, and then such just
Hmm.
tremendous. Beethoven famously wrote a amazing symphony for Napoleon, thinking he was the great savior of that's going to bring freedom and justice and truth, and then when he turned out to be just another petty emperor wannabe tyrant, he wrote another one that basically was the opposite.
So and that's that's a lot of the. Well, speaking of music, though, my favorite singer is Morrissey, because when I was in high school, my favorite band was the Smiths. That he's the famous frontman of the Smiths. If you don't know who the Smiths are, then I
Who are you?
really want you to quit watching and turn this off and go do something more important,
like listen to the Smiths and then come back.
And then come back.
Yeah.
Because then you'll understand me a lot better. But anyway, Morrissey has a song called Irish Blood, English Heart.
Okay.
One of my favorite Morrissey songs. I just saw him at Graceland. Yep, I saw his 40 Years of Morrissey concert at Graceland. Yep, which was amazing. We had sixth row.
Oh,
dude, it was
dude.
I think I got splattered by some of his sweat.
Oh,
No,
you haven't showered since. I can tell you.
I have not showered. I won't. Well, I will shower in April, as is my habit. So anyway, when the flowers bloom, I will bathe.
I will smell good with nature.
When nature smells better, so will I. So anywho, Morrissey, Moser, as we call him around the house, he has a song, English Blood, Irish Heart. Yeah. Irish Blood, English Heart, Right. And in that song, he name checks Oliver Cromwell.
No.
Yeah, he says, and denounce the royal. Okay, he mentions Oliver Cromwell, and then he says, and let's denounce the royal line that still salutes him and will salute him forever. So, I'm basically, what's the point of that? The point of that was to say my musical tastes are better than everyone else's.
It was complete.
The song I like.
Complete music elitism.
Right. I'm not a musical leveler. I'm a music aristocrat. I'm definitely a musical elite.
Royalist.
Yeah, exactly. A musical Jacobin, that's me. But anywho, Oliver Cromwell is a name at least people who are educated could tell you something about him. Right. Or at least I don't know if they could tell you something about him, but they would at least recognize the name.
Right, they recognize the name.
Which is really, more, it's like Plutarch said, we have more to fear from those who are a little educated, because they cling to that little bit of education and so tenaciously and so defensively,
Right.
But anywho, back to Cromwell.
So we had they had the English Civil War. Mm-hmm. And at the time the good guys won. The Model Army won. Freedom.
The Model Army, Cromwell, right? They were members of Parliament, including himself, and they, after technically a couple of wars, they ended up overthrowing the monarch, the tyrant Charles I.
We've got to show this,
right? They returned to tradition and lopped his head off.
Yes, and because that's the only way to treat a tyrant. And so there became a great discussion about, since Parliament was in power, what that should look like, right? I mean, there was a discussion about, like, should we reinstate a quasi new monarchy? Should we overthrow the whole thing? Should we there were debates that were going on.
Right. I mean, well, it's just like
it was like an Article 5 convention.
Sort of, well, it does demonstrate the power of that. But they get rid of the House of Lords because
Mhm.
part of Parliament was the House of Lords. They get rid of the House of Lords because there's no such thing as a lord. We're all, equal under equal in the eyes of God, and we should all be equal under the law. But and that this is the sort of agenda that was pursued by Cromwell and the parliamentarians, the Roundheads, as they came to
Mhm.
be known. And yeah, so once they disposed of the despot, they Cromwell, sort of rose to the position of leadership. And yeah, they began to debate. Well, what sort of government? We're a republic, a commonwealth, right? The English word for republic is commonwealth. Literally means the same thing as we've discussed before. Commonwealth and republic, those are just commonwealth's an English word and republic's a Latin word. It means the same thing. So they're like, now we're a commonwealth. Um, how should this government look? And of course, there had been people who had theorized what the Commonwealth should look like over the years. And so, yeah, there began to be debates in Parliament. Should we have an elective monarchy of sorts? Well, that was definitely the minority view. No one wanted to, walk down that road again, even a couple of steps. That would be the
Right.
wrong way. So let's have a popularly elected parliament, meaning the House of Commons, and we'll have an executive council of state,
Mhm.
and we'll have members, and we'll govern this way. And that, in and of itself, is a good idea. Getting rid of the House of Lords was a
Right.
good idea. Popularly elected members, because I don't know if you know, but Parliament, even to this day, members of Parliament don't represent populations from the they don't represent the cities where they're elected.
Right. It's not like in America our representatives that we elect, they actually represent a district of people, and in theory they represent the ideas, culture, and they're bringing to the table to Congress.
Yeah, they're supposed to represent the people of their district.
Right.
That's not how Parliament works.
Right.
They've divided it up into boroughs that vote, and those citizens vote, but they're not voting to be represented in Parliament. They're voting for members of Parliament who, in the English interpretation of democracy, those members of Parliament represent the entire nation as a whole.
Right.
They're just divided up into what we might call voting districts for the sake of electoral expediency.
Yeah, in some ways it's kind of the opposite. In other words, they're not representing the people, they're representing the state to the people. It's kind of an opposite.
Well, they each represent everybody,
Right. Okay.
which is
yeah.
a even weirder
the
thing
weird-
because if you I mean, as I see it, we have a mockery of republicanism in this country because every member of the House of Representative, on average, represents about 1 million people, which is ridiculous.
That's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. It's a mockery of it. But anyway, the point is, so they have Parliament. They're coming, good ideas. Get rid of the House of Lords, popularly elected. Let's and Oliver Cromwell becomes the leader of Parliament. But there's and so the debate starts. Well, what do we call Cromwell?
Right. Who is he?
What is his title? It's like we experienced that, although again, people won't know that we experienced that at our own in our own history. When
Didn't John Adams want to be,
yeah, he wanted to. He
His
said
Excellency,
his
the-
excellency.
Your Majesty.
Your Majesty. A lot of these things were
Right.
bandied about. What do we call the president, who is the foreign face, of the United States? What do we call him? And we were Englishmen, and so it was bandied about. Let's call him your Highness. Let's
Mhm.
call him your Majesty, your Excellency, your Grace. There were lots of suggestions, and so that was happening in England. What do we call Oliver Cromwell? And he ended up with the title Lord Protector.
No, because I don't know where that title came from, because they just got rid of the House of Lords. I mean, this is me thinking in my little music brain, like, wait a second, you just got rid of the House of Lords, and so you're the only Lord now? Is that what that is?
Yeah, and so some people, and yes, well, and your intuition is the same as many of his supporters. They were like, "Wait a minute, how there are no lords, but now you're the Lord,
Right.
not the well, I mean, not the
Well,
Lord, but you're the Lord protector." That seems a bit like a king by another name,
right.
and he showed himself to be that. He showed himself to be someone for whom power was seductive.
Yeah.
And when he saw himself surrounded by a bunch of sycophantic slags who supported him and saw him as the giver of goods, then he started to believe his own hype.
Yeah.
And this caused many of his supporters, including my personal hero Algernon Sidney, many of it, John Milton, James Harrington, many names that you don't recognize, but who were immensely influential on the founding fathers of the United States. They turned on him, on Cromwell, because they're like, wait a minute, this is not at all what we fought for over all these years of this English Civil War. We didn't lop the head off a king just to have one of our own become
See,
king.
and this is where I love, like, because most political movements start because you're getting screwed, so you're on the losing team, and so
Right. You end up saying sour grapes kind of thing, right?
right. And so no, we're
You're a
leaving
sore
this.
loser.
You're a sore loser. You're somehow unable to gain political power, and so we're going to mess things up, and we're gonna slop it up, as they say in the NCAA March Madness tournament. We're gonna slop it up, and and just make a record and start our own movement, and that's how most political movements start. And this is where the Republicans, like Sidney, and the Levelers, I think, are so courageous and so amazing, because they did just the opposite. They were the winners, as you alluded to earlier.
Yeah, they were the winners. They won the English Civil War. They had control of the government. All of them. I mean, Sidney and Henry Vane the Younger. They were in Council of State. They held position under the Cromwellian regime. And many of these people. We're talking, when it comes to the Levelers, we're talking for the most part. Well, the organizers of the Levelers, the leaders of the Levelers, were high-ranking officers in the New Model Army.
Right.
These are guys, generals, colonels, officers in the New Model Army who, well, I guess we need to put there's one thing we've missed in the history, which is Cromwell, upon exalting himself, right, to this Lord Protector, exalting himself to this position. And he decided, well, I've got the New Model Army. They answer to me. I'm going to force my religious beliefs on the country. Now, that really set off some people.
Yeah.
So he instructed the army, look, you're going to go around England and you're going to put a stop to all of these people who are meeting together to discuss the scriptures, to have prayers together. We're going to enforce our version of Protestantism, and anyone who doesn't like it can have their property seized and be imprisoned. And he literally began using the army to enforce, at the point of a gun, religious intoleration.
Right.
You had religious conformity.
Right.
If you didn't conform, then you literally got your property taken under the command of Cromwell, but at the point of a gun, of squadrons of the New Model Army.
I think of I don't know. This is a movie that I saw. I don't know who else saw it, but 7 Years in Tibet. I think about that scene when the Chinese come to Tibet and they just start tearing up the floors and just messing things up, and
Mhm.
and tearing down all of their you know, all the religious, anything that meant anything to these people, they just tore down. And Cromwell, the model army, was commanded to do the same sort of thing: go into churches, destroy crucifixes, destroy
Mhm.
stained glass,
Mhm.
anything that that didn't
That he considered
right,
idolatry.
right,
But understand that he considered.
which
Now,
made him and I
right, which made him an idol, right? To many people, because it's one of those things, man. If you've got the army, you know, that's why our founding fathers and people after the Cromwell regime had ended were so dead set against a permanent army.
right,
They had experienced firsthand what a man with an army at his command can do to liberty. So, you know, our founding fathers were dead set against a standing army, right? You have state militias who
Mhm.
can come together to form a national, that is to say, a continental army, if such becomes
But
necessary.
that was meant to be a group of citizens, you know, who are prepared and regulated and set aside to do. In other words, it wasn't, they weren't full. It was your volunteer army.
Right. And so when Cromwell took his army and said, all right, now we're going to use it not only to get rid of a king, we're going to get rid of anybody who to him was a nonconformist. And he had the advantage of an army who, for the most part, supported that idea,
Right.
or at least had the belief that, well, I obey my commander, period.
Right.
And however, we are blessed, we literally as Americans are blessed to know of a group of officers and men in the New Model Army who refused to participate in the oppression of their fellow citizens. And they ended up being called levelers. You can please look it up, man. I'm going to put this plug in for Liberty Fund. Please, 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 in the name of all that's holy, if you go to Liberty Fund, if you just Google Liberty Fund levelers, they have 7 volumes of leveler pamphlets, and it comes with an introduction that talks about all the things we've talked about much longer, introduces the most prominent personalities among the levelers, play, you know, a good historical context like the one we just did, but maybe perhaps a bit wider.
Mhm.
And yeah, Liberty Fund, levelers, quotations, debates in the army, right? They had the army, they would have debates. They would come together in, you know, all right, we've got to discuss, are we going to go round? Because you can imagine, right? If word came down from King Joe there at his palace on the Potomac,
Right.
if he said, you know what, um, I want battalions of the U.S. Army to be sent out to seize Bibles
Mm-hmm.
from all Americans, because we've noticed a trend that all of these crazy domestic terrorists are all Christian and they all have Bible verses in their social media bios. So to protect Americans, we need to seize these Bibles from these people. Now, the idea would be, at least based on history, that some of these people in the army would be like,
Yeah. I
I don't-
consider myself a Christian, and
yeah, well, like I have to obey my commander, but this sounds wacky.
right.
And so you had that in England. You had members of the army that would come together. And they had the Putney debates is a famous one that Liberty Fund has the record of the Putney debates, the transcript of the debates, where you had members of the army come together and say, what are we going to do about this? Are we going to follow? And then you had different speakers. You had men who became, you know, known to history as levelers stand up and say, not no, but hell no.
Right.
no, I'm not going to go around busting up churches and breaking up congregations of independent, churches of people who gather together,
Yeah,
nonconformists,
right. Who've done nothing to me, have done nothing to my family,
and who theoretically, now that we're a commonwealth,
right.
are supposed to enjoy the liberties associated with being a commonwealth.
Yeah.
And we're taking one of the central ones away from them under the command of a single dude. We just ended that. And so you'll read people, you'll read Algernon Sidney, John Milton, and their writings are like, what just happened?
Right.
Like, how did we go from, yay, we got rid of a tyrant, to, yay, now our tyrant, now the guy who got rid of tyranny is a tyrant.
Yeah.
But that's cool because he's my tyrant.
Well, and I think for listeners of this podcast, the Return to Tradition podcast, I one of the things
I thought this was the Joe Rogan podcast.
Oh yeah,
the Joe Rogan experience.
Sorry, I forgot to tell you. Sorry. Yeah, Joe's gonna be joining us later.
I'm gonna have to put in a call, Mr. Rogan, J Bone.
What up? Come on in. Yeah,
you lied to me, sir.
We might have time for him. We'll see.
His people been calling. I don't know. It's a scheduling issue. Y'all know how it is.
It is. Joe, we'll get back to you.
Don't give up hope, buddy. Keep shooting your shot, Joe.
You make it on the Return to Tradition.
You'll be on this podcast. We'll let you on someday. You'll be in the queue. Trust me. All right, go ahead anyway.
Anyway, imagine. Let's just imagine 6 months from now. It's November, and Donald Trump wins. Donald Trump wins the election. And maybe he decides, we're going to be sending some troops to, I don't know, Ukraine. We're going to send some troops to some other Middle Eastern country for no reason. We're gonna send some drones out and above. I mean, it would be the equivalent of his commanding officer saying, "Wait a sec, I may have voted for you, but this is not what I voted for. This is not what I wanted." It'd be essentially the Republican Congress standing up and saying no to the guy that they supported and had all their hopes.
Right, but you have to. But there's a little difference in the sense that the levelers weren't members of Parliament.
Right.
Now, there were members of Parliament who opposed Cromwell, and he had them barred from entering the building. Right. When he was organizing this entire, mobilization of the military to put down nonconformist religions, he literally excluded from the meetings members of Parliament who disagreed with him.
Yep.
But in this case, we have the actual army, or at least, and to be really fair, an infinitesimally, statistically insignificant small number of soldiers and officers.
Right.
Insignificantly small.
Yeah.
And that's, but
they are willing to live by principles bigger than winning, bigger than this, as we talked about before, in our book club, being the ones to gain the spoils of winning, to be on the side of, to be the boss who is no
because all those royalists, right? All the royalists, those loyal to the now executed king, well, he had extended family known as the aristocracy.
Right.
And the House of Lords had been abolished.
But they were still around.
Well, they still owned large tracts of land.
Right.
And
large tracts.
Right. Everybody got that reference? You got it?
I got
it. Okay.
Yeah.
But I don't love her, but she's got such large tracts of land.
Look it up, kids. Look it up,
Who
kids.
doesn't like a good large tract of land?
Oh,
I'm telling
man.
you, man. I do.
Well,
I'm
yeah,
a big
yeah.
fan of large tracts of land.
Tracts of land get my
I would dare say that.
get my spine tingling, as they say.
Yes. So these guys in the new model, think about this, guys, because in reality, unless we learn from this, nothing that we're talking about matters at all. It's academic, scholarly, and worthless, to be honest. But these men who became known as the Levelers, who opposed being used by Oliver Cromwell to enforce his religious prejudices on the population of England, these men could have been richly rewarded for their obedience to the Lord Protector. They could have been given land and titles and wealth and position and power. They could have had all of that because, like I said, the leadership of the Levelers were high-ranking officers in the New Model Army.
Right.
These guys sacrificed promotion in favor of principle.
Yeah.
They really didn't care if the tyrant was one of them. All tyrants deserved the fate that Charles I suffered.
Yeah. I think and I think when you come to a crisis like that, like a real like when you start questioning your faith and you start questioning the things that you believe in or the people that you believe in, and you start thinking, wait a sec, what's more important? It almost allows you, it frees your mind to think holier thoughts, to think more principled thought.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what the Levelers did, because not only did they say, wait, this isn't right, but they also went further than that, and they started talking, about crazy things like I don't know, self-ownership.
Well, private property.
Private
Private property being sacrosanct.
Right.
Because Cromwell's army was doodly-doo, walking right into your trespassing onto your private property, saying, oi, we see a crucifix. We've seen people meeting at your house on the Sabbath. Gonna have to go and stop that. Well, they didn't kill them.
Okay, well.
But I mean, they took their property and imprisoned them.
Right.
They
killed their ability to talk.
He did end up killing some of the Levelers, right? Some of the soldiers.
Yep.
But, private property, these are the principles that these men believed they were fighting for against a king who had become a despot. And their idea, and then they see one of their own, now that he's in power, trespassing on private property, denying the right of religious worship to the people of England. And it blew their mind.
Yeah.
And they were like, no, we're going to carry on consistently fighting for these principles, not fighting for this person who claimed to share these values. And so, yes, private property ownership, religious liberty,
more universal suffrage.
Yeah, letting more people vote, expanding the voter base. Not crazy, but expanding the voter base. And these were their principles, and they expressed them. And like I say, Liberty Fund has 7 volumes of their pamphlets, right? So you can go and you can read them. And they had a few that were, that were more, I guess, became more well known historically than others. I'm just going to read one, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
A part of one.
Let's get a little taste.
This is called the Large Petition. All right. So this is now Liberty Fund gives this document the nickname the Levelers' Declaration of Independence, because it expresses their opposition not only to kingly oppression, but parliamentary oppression as well. Oppression by any of one with power, of your basic liberties, right? Of your essential liberties. And so this is and they had an agreement, and we'll talk about that in a second. But this is, and it was influential on our own Declaration of Independence, right? There are the founding fathers routinely mentioned the levelers, quoted them from their documents, mentioned them as exemplars in their fight against not only monarchy but against those who legislatively supported, but also in the fact that American cities were occupied by British soldiers.
Right.
And remember, the levelers were soldiers who refused to occupy British cities to oppress
Right.
citizens. All right, so this is from.
Well, I want to say, even I just, because you mentioned the founding fathers, I think even you can see a little taste of that, even with like George Washington deciding to step down after 2 terms. You know, like, I am not going to be the Oliver Cromwell of the United States of America. Because he could have been king, and there would have been many
Lord Protector,
the Lord Protector Washington. You know, he certainly could have done that. So I think, like, even those little things, you can see a proto liberty movement thing going on with the levelers.
Oh, yeah, no doubt about it. They certainly were a model of such a movement. And so anyway, this is their large petition from March 1647. That as no civil government is more just in the Constitution than that of parliaments, having its foundation in the free choice of the people, and as the end of all government is the safety and freedom of the governed, even so the people of this nation in all times have manifest most hearty affections unto parliaments as the most proper remedy of their grievances. Yet such hath been the wicked policies of those who from time to time have endeavored to bring this nation into bondage, that they have in all times, either by the disuse or abuse of parliaments, deprived the people of their hopes, and do most earnestly entreat that you will stir up your affections to a zealous love and tender regard of the people who have chosen and trusted you, and that you will seriously consider that the end of their trust was freedom and deliverance from all kind of temporal grievances and oppressions. This was delivered to Oliver Cromwell as an attempt to say, oi, remind you of who side, which side your bread is buttered on.
Yeah.
That these people supported you, and now you're using this body, this parliament, you're using it to do to them exactly what the tyrant, the monarch, did to them.
Mm-hmm.
And that the end of their trust, meaning the reason they trusted you at all, Oliver, was because you promised them freedom and deliverance from such oppression. And now you're the oppressor.
Right. And I love that, because the implication, of course, is that therefore, I mean, what's the therefore? The therefore, we have the right to remove ourselves from your bondage, just like the king, just like, just like the Declaration of Independence did. You know, at any point that the government doesn't suit our principles, our life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, property. Once it entreats on those principles, it is our duty, sacred duty, to put off that government and start afresh, start anew.
Yeah, choose new guardians
That's right.
For our liberty. Well, what did the levelers receive for their courage and their endeavor to restore liberty to the Cromwell regime?
I am sure that he became thoughtful, and Cromwell thought about it and said, they got a good point.
That's right.
I have kind of overstepped my bounds a little bit. I'll tell you what. Let's take a step back. I'm actually going to remove myself. Mm-hmm. I'm going to resign, happily
Mhm.
resign, and I will allow Parliament to choose a new
Yeah.
Lord Protector or whatever they decide
Yeah,
to
we'll
do.
just have a council, an
Yeah,
executive council of state. We
that's what he
don't.
did, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it. And that's
Yeah,
why he's so
that's
revered
why.
today. That's no, of course.
I mean,
What
or we'll just imprison him, and
or we'll just throw them in the Tower of London, let them starve, and maybe we'll shoot a few of them
yeah, yeah, in a churchyard.
in a churchyard. Let's, if we hear they're meeting somewhere, let's show up and let's execute them.
Right.
Which is what Crom on his orders happened to those three that did you mention their names?
I didn't mention their
You want to
names.
mention their
I
names?
do.
Say their names, Mike. Say their
Say their
names.
names. We've got Corporal Perkins, John Church, and William Thompson,
For your service to liberty.
brothers, and yeah.
And then you had people like the guy who was the author of that large petition that I read to you, William Walwyn. And then you had John Lilburn, who was a colonel in the New Model Army, Thomas Prince and Richard Overton, all of them renowned parliamentarians, renowned people who fought for liberty under Cromwell's command. They were all imprisoned in the Tower of London. And from this tower, from the Tower of London, from their prison, they wrote a series of, I think they called it an agreement of the free people of England. Basically, sort of, this is what we think we wish would have happened. This is what we anticipated happening when we fought to end the monarchy, when we fought to dethrone the despot Charles. And they wrote a few of these. I'm going to read to you from the last of those. It's called An Agreement of the Free People of England. And just see, I mean, if you feel any sort of simpatico with these men. So it says an agreement of the free people, written by Lieutenant Colonel John Lilburn, Master William Walwyn, Master Thomas Prince, and Master Richard Overton, prisoners in the Tower of London, May 1st, in the year of our Lord 1640.
Now, what's significant about that, just remember the date that I gave of the shooting was May 17th of the same year.
Right. They opened their agreement of the free people of England, tendered as a peace offering to this distressed nation. Now, guys, okay, again, there is no purpose for the study of history except to give you good examples to follow and bad examples to avoid, right? If you believe that in America, the United States of America, we are a distressed nation, then I would suggest paying attention to these words, because we need to learn from the experience of these men that are known to history as levelers, but in point of fact were patriots, freedom fighters, Christians who, in their mind, were fighting for the good old cause of Parliament and Christ in their minds and in point of fact. So they open the agreement of the free people of England with Matthew 5:9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. And they say, if afflictions make men wise and wisdom direct to happiness, then certainly this nation is not far from such a degree thereof as may compare, if not far exceed, any part of the world, having for some years bypast drunk deep of the cup of misery and sorrow. We bless our God. Our consciences are clear from adding affliction to affliction, having ever labored from the beginning of our public distractions to compose and reconcile them, and should esteem it the crown of all our temporal felicity, that yet we might be instrumental in procuring the peace and prosperity of this commonwealth, the land of our nativity. And therefore, according to our promise and our late manifestation of the 14th of April, 1640, being persuaded of the necessity and justness thereof, as a peace offering to the free people of this nation, we tender this ensuing agreement, not knowing any more effectual means to put a final period to all our fears and troubles. And then they go through their idea for how government should function in a commonwealth among a free people. But guys, it would be my hope that upon my death, and I think Mike would want this said of him, that it could be said that our conscience are clear from adding affliction to affliction, having labored from the beginning to end our suffering, to help our people no longer have to drink deep from the cup of misery and sorrow, and to be in some way instrumental in procuring peace and prosperity to the land of our nativity. All the levelers, as I said, guys, were an insignificant number of people. None of them ever attained any leadership of anything.
Right.
They were imprisoned, some of which till they were nearly dead, some of whom were eventually allowed to, I didn't set free, but to ignominy. We have those, the names that Mike read off, who were murdered by Cromwell's, at Cromwell's command by their fellow soldiers. But they were so few. And if you measure things with by a worldly metric,
right,
their lives were meaningless.
right.
What they did made no difference at all. Because what? In 1660, what happened? Charles's son becomes the king.
Right.
They welcome Parliament votes to restore the monarchy. Now, curiously, of course, Cromwell died of natural causes, and his son, again, right back to hereditary government, Cromwell's son becomes Lord Protector,
Right.
Richard Cromwell. And which is so contrary to the concept of self-government, of popular sovereignty, that you can see even in this, he had become so consumed by that internal rot of power lust.
Yeah. Ambition and power.
Yeah, it had eaten him alive. And so he died of natural causes. Cromwell, his son, was not his, the apple fell far from the tree when it comes to his ability to organize and inspire and inflame and all of this. So it falls apart, and Parliament invites Charles's son to take the throne of England, thus ending the Commonwealth. And so you would say, well, the levelers, those three guys that were murdered by Cromwell, died for nothing. These levelers, they could have had a prosperous, easy life instead of wasting away in the Tower of London,
right,
for their principles, right? And whereas by a worldly metric, their lives were meaningless, you could say the same of Jesus. He could have parlayed his popularity into power. I mean, which is pretty much the reason he was arrested and killed, right?
Yeah.
Because he could have, and they recognized that ability and wanted to quash it.
Top that nonsense.
Right. We're not, we don't want that. But these levelers, their spirit, their pamphlets, their rigid adherence to eternal principles of liberty inspired our own founding fathers, right? So the levelers died feeling like failures.
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to what they said, right?
Right. Their goals were not accomplished.
Right.
They were,
Their goals were not accomplished. And even worse than not
Yeah.
accomplished, everything they'd fought and bled for was mocked by the accession of Charles II to the throne. They had suffered for nothing. Much like, I guess, how American soldiers who served in Afghanistan feel.
right.
Right? We 3,600 American soldiers died in Afghanistan to dispossess the Taliban from power, only to have the Taliban placed in power 20 years later.
20 years later. Yep.
But guys, the importance is this: live your principles, man. Even if you die feeling that you've wasted your life, your goals were never accomplished, if you live true to your principles, you never know who you might be influencing. Stand up for what you believe, make those beliefs public.
And frankly, damn the consequences.
Damn the consequences, right? If you end up with your head on a piece of wood on Tower Hill, being executed for your defense of liberty, defense of God and his Christ, as they would say, in your defense of the good old cause, if that happens to you, then so persecuted they the prophets that came before you. You're just walking a road that many great and good men walked before.
I would ask those who are listening and who take this stuff seriously. And if you've listened to this, I think
If you don't take it seriously,
yeah,
you
turn off.
and, you and me ain't friends.
Right. I would ask 3 things. I'm going to give a homework assignment.
Oh boy.
I know. Go to Liberty Fund. Just read one of their pamphlets. Just go through it. Just look and I just spend 5 minutes and just look at it and learn a little bit about the levelers. When you kneel down and pray tonight, thank God for men who are willing to die thinking they've lost, knowing that in your heart it's because of them that we have this thing that we call freedom, this idea, this God-given gift of liberty. And then go and do likewise. Go and look at small things in your life that you can live closer to your principles, that you can stand up for something.
Don't draw nigh unto the principles of liberty, but with your personal habits be far from them. Everyone, as insignificant as you feel, guess what? I'm going to tell you something. As insignificant as you feel, if you do something today to increase your personal virtue that you didn't do yesterday, you will have helped the cause of liberty move forward. Because there is no liberty without virtue. And we need each one of us. We all fall short of the glory of God. We all need to repent. And I'm not going to judge you because you sin differently than me. I know the ways I need to repent, as do you. And do something today that demonstrates your devotion to the good old cause of liberty and God. Do something. Read a verse in the Bible, man. Pray. If you haven't prayed in years, pray to God. Do something. Serve your neighbor. Do something that today increases your personal virtue. and you will have done more than most people who proclaim
On Facebook.
or anywhere
Right.
who proclaim to be patriots. You will have done more than those people, because we're not going to be, we never will be free. If there were these people calling for a civil war, it will be like the English Civil War.
Right.
All these little Cromwells would be so surfeited with this seductive
Oh man,
taste of power.
they would. Oh, the worst of us would be crawling over themselves to take
Yeah.
to start a new model
You're
army.
right. We can't have liberty because we don't have virtue, but we collectively aren't virtuous, but we individually can start ramping that up. And it's possible. That's the thing. We can do it.
We can, and I want to make this point that like some there may be some people that aren't religious. There might be some people that virtue seems like such a quaint idea. But if you're liberty minded, if you're somebody that believes in liberty and you want to throw off the power of government, the only way to do it is through personal virtue. Because everything that you do that is good, everything that you do for your neighbor, as you mentioned, is one less. It's like one little piece of straw off the hay of tyranny that they cannot they can't get to you.
It's like that whole thing about Lenin. Remember about
Yeah.
how did you manage to bring the whole of Mother Russia under the command of this rabble of revolutionaries? Well, you can't break a broom, but you break one little piece of the broom, and soon you've broken the broom.
That's right.
You couldn't stand there and rip open a phone book.
What's a phone book?
Right. But you could rip a
thinking.
page at a time.
Yeah.
And accomplish the same. Does it take a bit longer? Yes. But
it's also the only way.
The only sure way.
Yeah.
So you just think of that yourself. We're sitting here and so many of us are like, let's break the broom of tyranny. We're not going to do it. You are not going to do that in that way. But can you take the twig that is in your power? Can you break that? Yes. And if we all do it and we each break one of these little pieces of straw that are bound together to form this broom of tyranny, if we all just take one of those little pieces of straw and break it, it will be broken.
And I want to take that symbolism and make it like concrete. Like, what does that mean? Because when you do that, when you go and serve your neighbor, that becomes a relationship.
Yep.
That becomes a relationship that now you feel fealty to them. They feel fealty to you. And you know who you don't feel fealty to? The governor.
Why do you think, look, I'm going to call a spade a spade. Why do you think during this whole pandemic, why do you think it was all of a sudden everyone work from home, everyone do curbside delivery? That wasn't just a predictable, rational response.
Right.
It was a planned response. Because if you read Aristotle's Politics, for example, one of his tactics that he identifies of tyrants who are trying to overthrow a commonwealth, one of his tactics is make people strangers to each other. Don't make it where people don't gather together. Make it where men are strangers to their neighbors. Because if you are neighbors in the truest sense, you have a relationship, and you grow to care about that person. If you don't have curbside delivery, you have the experience of going to the store and seeing your neighbors and maybe striking up a conversation. And maybe you find that they're like-minded about liberty or many other things.
I just yesterday, I got a call from a friend of mine. He's a guitar player in one of the bands I play in. He's like, "Hey, we're going to be playing at this park out here." I said, "Okay." Well, it wasn't just a park. It was like just a small little neighborhood park. It wasn't like a big city park. It was a small neighborhood park, and The neighbors had planned to get together, BYOB, bring your own meat, potluck, have a good time. And I'm telling you, it's those kinds of things. That neighborhood is is in a better position for liberty than just about any neighborhood that I know of. Because that's just those are. It seems so quaint. It seems so old fashioned. It seems so, I don't know. But it's those relationships that matter, because it, it when it comes to helping our neighbors, when it comes to um, throwing off the tyrants, they're going to use what? They're going to use fear. They're going to use um, uh, want, and they're going to use victims to give us or to and then give us the solutions to those problems. And if we say no, we already got the solutions. We don't need them.
Right. And I mean, yes, there's so much benefit. It creates a sacred bond that you start to genuinely care about someone, you care about their well-being, and you come to a place where you're willing to defend their safety and their peace and prosperity, and guys, understand that those corporal, mortal beings who serve he who is the enemy of all righteousness, they do so with a plan. This isn't some ad hoc, attempt to destroy liberty. This has been a plan for ages that has been faithfully followed by those who serve the devil. I'm just going to call it like that.
Mm-hmm.
And just as our Lord has servants, followers of flesh and blood, so does he who was our father's enemy. And those people are not just hoping that things work out for them. They are planning for it. And one of those plans includes keeping people strangers.
Yep.
Divide them that we might command them. Right? I wanted to, I don't know if you have more to say on the subject.
Well, no, I think I what I wanted to say is thank you for introducing me to a political group that I feel very kindred spirited with.
Please go look them up,
Yeah,
guys.
I mean, like I thought they were a band. Okay.
And they are a band. There's a band.
There is a band.
You can look up. I'm sure the levelers are going to be like, "Hey, we got some streams tonight.
Right.
What's the deal with that?
What's the stuff in America? Come, yeah. Anyway, but so I wanted to thank you for introducing me to these people, these wonderful people, and the causes that they lived and died for.
Yeah, and there's something that just came into my mind is that people who know me in real life know that 99% of the things I say are funny and jokes and sarcasm and things. And it came into my mind that so often the things we talk about are serious because they are serious. They are things that matter. They are things of eternal consequence, literally eternal consequence. But let us be not as the hypocrites, and when we fast, have long faces and sad countenances. Make sure that people see that your love of liberty makes you happy. Don't let them see you that it makes you constantly angry or sad or feeling oppressed or depressed. Let them see that liberty and your espousal and your fight for that brings you joy. Because it's much easier for people to join with you if they see that your way of living is making you happy. All of us have plenty of reason to be sad. Let's take it upon ourselves as those who support the universal worth of each individual man. Let's take it upon ourselves to show our fellow man that liberty is joyful, right? We One of the core tenets of it is to deliver happiness, right? The pursuit of happiness, right? It didn't say the pursuit of anything else, pursuit of happiness, right? Now, to our fathers, that meant the pursuit of virtue as an eternal principle. I wanted to read the final paragraph from the document that I read from the agreement to the free people of England. They ended the document, and go and look it up, because it is sort of you will see instantly the influence of these agreements to the people. You will instantly see the influence on our own Declaration of Independence. It'll be very clear to you, right? I won't have so now. I'll read the end of it here. It says, "Thus, as becometh a free people, thankful unto God for this blessed opportunity, and desirous to make use therefore to his glory, in taking of every yoke and removing every burden, in delivering the captive and setting the oppressed free. We have in all the particular heads forementioned done as we would be done unto. And as we trust in God, will abolish all occasion of offense and discord, and produce the lasting peace and prosperity of this commonwealth, and accordingly do, in the sincerity of our hearts and consciences, as in the presence of Almighty God, give clear testimony of our absolute agreement to all and every part hereof, by subscribing our hands thereunto." Dated 1st day of May in the year of our Lord, 1649. There is no people more blessed than the people of America. We must take advantage of the blessed opportunity still afforded us by what remains of our liberty, to remove from our fellow man every yoke, every burden, to deliver the captives and set free the oppressed.
Amen, brethren. Goodbye.